assembled. Welcome, everyone. This is a busy, busy weekend. I thank all the artists and all the panelists for taking time out of their schedules to come today. We're going to try to carve out a little time here to think big thoughts with the help of our colleagues, of Alan's colleagues. I'm going to moderate today. Alan and I talked about this. Sometimes our artist in residence moderates, but I want him to be able to really feel free to tell you things as opposed to have to guide the conversation.
I never have anything to say.
We're going to try to use the microphones. I should establish a good example. Try to use the microphones, not because necessarily y'all need them in the room, but it helps with the reference video that we're making. So I'm going to do a tiny bit of preamble here, and some of you have heard me say this before, but just in case you haven't. We established this seminar several years ago when we came back from conference, Leanne and I did, and we said, you know, there, at least once a year at the Opera America conference, there are big issues in the industry that get discussed. Trends, things that affect your lives and your careers, and as singers, and especially as young artists, you just often, not only do you not get a chance to engage in those kinds of conversations, but you're sometimes not even aware that they're happening until they affect you in some way personally. So there are two prongs of today's seminar. One is to address those kind of top-down issues that are happening in our industry and see what these people from diverse parts of the industry have to tell you about them. And the second, of course, and this will kick in a bit more in the private session that follows this public session, will be for you to ask questions of our panelists that they will, I'm sure, answer very honestly and very kindly, but very frankly. So I'm going to introduce folks, starting here immediately to my right. We have soprano Tamara Wilson. Tammy is Tammy is a Wolf Trap Opera alum. We were just talking about the production of Giorno di Regno she did in 2008 at the Barns, where the patrons told us that we needed to turn down the microphones. And it wasn't just Tammy. We had some nice powerhouse voices that eventually grew up to sing in venues bigger than the Barns. And that happens, and we're very happy about that. Tammy just recently won the Richard Tucker Award for 2016, and she was a 2016 Olivier nominee, which is very fancy. Michael Eberhard, our colleague, the artistic administrator from Opera Philadelphia. Okay, Philadelphia for a little while now. He was actually, I hadn't realized until I looked this up, at the Philadelphia Orchestra for a time before that, and a very short time. And Michael also, for a while before he went into the dark side of the opera business, was a singer. So you've got that perspective there that I'm sure you will find very helpful. And then we have Caroline Woodfield, who is Senior Vice President and Artist Manager at Opus 3 Artists. Welcome, Caroline. Opera alums on her roster, and it's been wonderful to stay in touch with her. And one of her alums, of course, is sitting next to her, one of her clients and our alums. Alan Held, as you all know already now, is our 2016 artist in residence. He spent a lot of time in this area this spring, what with the WNO ring cycle, singing Wotan, and now coming back here to spend 3 periods of residency with our young artists. He already had a week here in which most of you met him. He'll be here this week. He's going to hang out with us tomorrow, maybe do a little singing on the Barn stage. We'll see how that goes. And then do the masterclass on Monday, and then Friday night sing with a bunch of you on the America the Beautiful concert.
Thank you for putting my date, 1987, 88.
Is that wrong?
None of the young artists who were born by then.
Who was born in 1987? Come on. Oh. All right, so there.
Okay, feel better. I feel dangerous.
I was born later.
We will not pull the old fart card, Alan. We will not. Oh, and Tammy, because of Tammy, they were supposed to turn down the microphones, but Alan actually broke a pane of plate glass in the Barns with his voice.
Oh, that's the dream.
Okay. And why is this called Recitative? You know, you have to name things. So when we were sitting around trying to figure out how to name
You were
it,
having to do recit. I was like, no.
it's improv.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Come on, say.
Nope.
Actually, actually, I should say that because just because when we had to name this thing, we had to call it something. It happens every year. Is coming home from the conference and thinking that's where the arias happen, right? All the general directors and the people of America, and they sit around and they do very high-profile pontificating about things, but it's not the real work. The real work is the work that's done here with all you guys. That's where the plot is advanced, and that's where the things that matter really happen. So we just called it Recitative. All right, here we go. I solicited some topics. A bunch of you wrote back to me. Thank you very much for that. And we're just going to get started somewhere kind of random, and it will go from there. So I'm going to encourage someone to take that off of mute. There you go. There you go. And we'll pass these microphones around. We'll try to stay on point here. Communication. Okay, this was a big theme in the things that you sent to me, and we just had a discussion over lunch. So I'm going to talk specifically from your perspective. What is involved with communication that you have with the tastemakers in our industry? We've got some singers here who can speak to that from their perspective. We've got someone who's doing casting for a company, and we've got an agent. So I asked them at lunch, what are the deal breakers? What things happen in communication with artistic administrators and with agents that are non-starters, things that can doom a gesture that you would write or get in touch with? Anybody want to jump in and start that conversation?
Use this.
Yeah, give it a shot.
As a manager and agent of singers, I think communication is the key to the relationship that is the most important relationship for us as agents and should be for you as clients. And the most important thing that you need to do is to respond. We need you to respond. We also need to know what you're thinking. And although email and text messaging and Facebooking and all of that is fine, there is no substitute for a face-to-face meeting or a Skype call or even an old-fashioned telephone call. So I urge you to, I know that now everybody is inhibited by picking up the phone spontaneously, so make a phone appointment. It's the only way that you will really communicate in the easiest and least dangerous manner. As you know, emails, you can't tell by the tone, anybody's tone in an email. You're never quite sure what people mean. If the subject matter is more complicated than yes or no or I don't know.
And just as we pass the mic down, and just be aware of the fact that all of these folks and all the agents I've talked to, I mean, people do not mind seeing you or talking to you face to face if you make an appointment. I know there's a lot of frustration sometimes because I have all these emails, all this correspondence, but I've never really sat down and talked to someone. So it sounds old-fashioned, but really you've got to get your face in front of people in order to really understand each other. Michael, you got anything?
Yeah, I would agree. To specifically respond, I don't know if there's anything that would doom you with communicating. If you sent me an email or a call, I mean a cold actual phone call, I think that's a little awkward. If I pick up, not that screen call, it puts the other person immediately in a position of having to respond, maybe not in the best way. I mean, it's a little awkward to do it by initial cold call by phone. So an email is completely fine to set up a phone appointment is great. What did you just say?
Well, no, we're gonna, yeah.
I think it is important to have face-to-face for different reasons with me as opposed to Caroline, perhaps. We know so much of what I do is casting is I have to see you, number one, but also to get a sense of who you are, because it's more that goes into the casting process than just, can you sing this role? We know when we have somebody with us for an extended period of time, you want to know what that person's like. And I will often do research if I see you sung at another company and I know the person well, I may call them and say, hey, what was your experience with this person? What are they like as a colleague? So for me to then have some time with you, even if it's just like here, if afterwards grab me and have a few minutes, you get a sense of somebody. and that's important.
Yeah, Tammy? Sure.
When I was in my Young Artist program, the person in charge told me immediately answer any call that comes in, especially if it's from a New York area code. And that was a good rule of thumb, because you could miss opportunities, you could miss important information coming your way. You might need to jump in that day, and if you say, like, if you don't answer right away, that'll go to somebody else who's much more fast and on the spot. As far as a singer's responsibility emailing with a manager, always be professional. A lot of times you can get very friendly with your managers because you develop a relationship over your career, and obviously part of that is going to be friendship, but make sure that you maintain a business relationship. Don't just go, oh, I can't believe I drank all that last night. Don't do that. Make it very professional and succinct and to the point. A lot of times you can ramble on in emails. If you need to just know about this one contract at this point, just say, hey, I need this. Done. And then they can focus on that. If you send them a weekly email with a billion things for them to do, they're going to go, stop it. Right? Because they do have their own job. They're not just catering to your needs, and you need to be respectful of that.
And it's interesting that the divide you guys have to straddle right now in terms of speed of communication and speed of response. Because as Tammy said, you can't sit on stuff for very long these days because everything moves really fast. But we were talking before the last 10 years or so, really. Often, Carolyn, we were talking about the fact that people had time to think about what they were going to say before they said it. If you got a letter, if you had a letter in the mail or a phone message or something, you had a minute to gather your thoughts, call your circle, figure things out before you responded. And there's an element of that thoughtfulness that is actually probably kind of good to remember and to try to employ whenever you can.
But sometimes even if you just acknowledge the email, that you got it, that I need time to think about this or whatever, that's really important, because I get very frustrated. Sometimes present company excluded, sometimes agents aren't the speediest at responding, sometimes artistic administrators aren't fast to respond. But sometimes things are time sensitive, and if I'm trying to cast something or replace somebody, if I don't hear back from you, I will have to move on. But just an acknowledgement of the email is a big help.
I haven't told Alan that I'm going to ask this question and ask him first, so I'm going to give him a second while I ramble to prepare. I want to hear about saying no. This is a question I get a lot, and I know it's something that we've all talked about, because, of course, you want to respond, and whenever possible, you would like to respond affirmatively. But it is hard to learn to say no. It's hard to learn to say no without what we call verbal vomit, which is, no, but I'm so sorry, I wish you'd ask me some other time, and please, it's like, where do you stop that? How do you be polite yet firm? Go, Alan.
Have I ever said no? No. Early on, it was very difficult to say no to a contract. You think you have to take this, you have to do this, you have to do this, and you have to understand why you might be saying no. Is it a no because a role is not appropriate for you yet? Early on in my career, I was offered all kinds of things that just were not appropriate. I remember a major opera company in this country offered me when I was 29 years old to sing Baroque in Die Frau ohne Schaden. They offered me to sing Onegin, which is something I never will sing. They offered me Johanna an, and certain roles I was told very early on by a very wise man to never take on until I was 40 years old. Pizarro, for example, Scarpia, the Wotans, Hans Sachs. And even though you may want to take on these roles, you obviously can't. It's just too soon. It's too soon for a lot of reasons. Caroline and I were just talking about this, about certain roles for Wotan. I first started studying Wotan when I was a sophomore in college. I knew I wouldn't sing it for another 20 years, for crying out loud. But these were things that you have to learn how to say no to. And sometimes you have to say no to certain situations. Maybe you just don't think that you're mentally and physically prepared to go off to someplace for 3 months on a job. Maybe for lots of reasons. But you do have to be your own best advocate and have a good team around you, whether it be your agent, whether it be your trusted advisors, your teachers, whoever they all might be. You have to be able to say no at certain times. And it is hard, but sometimes you just have to learn to do it.
Anybody else on that?
My very first thing out of the Young Artist program was a very big offer, and I probably, in an intellectual sense, should have said no. But saying yes to that gave me an open door. Now, if you're going to do that for everything that you're offered, bad choices. Don't do that. But you do have to be methodical in your choices. I've had other things that have been very, very bright, shiny jobs offered to me that you have to go, I don't think that's right for my career at this time. And it is okay to say no. It is definitely okay to say no. If you ever feel pressured by your manager, by the company, it's your decision. It's your voice. These are the things that are working, not anybody else's decision for you. So don't feel like you have to say yes to everything. When you're starting out, you might need to say yes to a few things just so you could function and pay your bills. That's just a fact of life. But if somebody's going to come to you when you're 24, and say that you're too young for this one role, but for a year later they're offering you a role that like Gugena sings, no. Like you don't do it. What else was I going to say about that? Is in terms of a role that's too big for you, you never know how your body feels in a role until you've performed it. Not just learned it, until you've performed it. So if somebody says, oh, you have the perfect voice for this, we want to cast you in this right away, be smart and know that you need to learn it better than somebody who's been performing it for 10 years, just so that your first debut isn't, a debut version of what that role should be.
I just want to add, if you take on a certain role, because you think that maybe you can do it, what message are you sending? What message are you sending to agents? What message are you sending to administration? What to the music director? To the audience? If you take on that, well, then sometimes I think, well, you should be able to do this, and you have to be very careful about what message you send out with every role you take, and with how you, well, it goes on for just about everything in this business. How you respond to an email, how you don't respond to an email. Everything you do sends a message. You have to be cognizant of that.
And I wouldn't worry about pissing somebody off by saying no. And if they do get pissed off, well, that's their problem. Yeah, just don't worry about that. You've got to do what's right for you at the end of the day, and only you can make that decision. So.
And I think you folks are, you're accustomed to it. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd rather know straight off, and you don't torture yourself, don't torture us, just kind of straight off, and let everybody go about and finding a solution for you, and you can find a solution for the right role that you should be singing. But just don't be self-conscious about it. Be kind, be polite, don't get pissed off yourself. But yeah. So I should have said this. I should have prefaced this. You can ask questions at any point. So just let me know. Yes, go.
You mentioned being methodical about your decision making and knowing what's right for your career. But how do you know?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I'll rephrase questions too because of the camera. So we mentioned being methodical and doing what's right, but of course the question is, how do you know what's right so you can give the right answer?
Yeah, that's a toughie. A lot of times it'll be just you've sung through the role and this doesn't feel comfy. And if it doesn't feel comfy right away, maybe hold off and give it a little more time. Other times it's a gut feeling. I was offered something in Italy at a big house and it was a big role. You have to know that house is notorious for the public booing people. You have to know, I wonder who might be. But you have to know that if you were to debut an opera there in Italian and you are not an Italian singer who is established, you are not going to do well in that job. So it's safer for you as a singer to not go into something knowing that it's not necessarily going to be good for your career. Other things to go for, what is the production like? If it's something that's kind of a safe run-of-the-mill production where you can kind of discover traditions, and it's not at a huge house, if it's a more regional house to start out with, that's okay. I would say take chances in smaller houses do safe for big houses. You want to present your best self when it's on a more public arena. I was offered an AIDA, which was my very first thing out of my Young Artist program, which is stupid, I know. But it was in Australia, South Hemisphere, so the press from there doesn't get up here. It really doesn't, you know? And I know, right? So like I knew, and that house it's a smaller house than what we're used to here. So I knew with that going in mind that it would be a safer choice than for me to do it somewhere else first, you know? And I got 10 performances there. So I got a chance to do 10 performances, which is rare, of a very hard role early on, which again, you have to kind of pro and con list every decision that you have. Sometimes you're gone for 6 months, you want to go home for a month. I had a bout of traveling where I was done and I wanted my own bed. And I got an offer 2 days before I was supposed to go home. And it was a good offer, but I said no, because mentally I was done. I needed to go home. So yeah, you have to weigh what's good for your life, what's good for your vocal cords, and what's good for the trajectory of your career. Now here's the thing, if you have a good manager, like that, a fabulous woman right there, you will be shielded immediately from stuff that is stupid. You know, they're not gonna say, this really amazing job came up, but it's a very bad choice. They're not even gonna, tell you, which is good. They're supposed to help you figure out how to make your career last, not let you go up and then fizzle. Because they're banking on your career lasting too.
I'm going to throw it to the fabulous woman. Pick up the microphone, fabulous woman. What else could you add to the making of the decisions about when you could and can take something on before they have management? Are there any tools that you use that they can?
I think the first thing, I think the first thing is, whenever you're offered a job, you need to be able to answer successfully the question, why? Is there a good reason for doing this job? Whether it is, Messiah in the local cathedral, or whether it is AIDA in Australia, for example. You need to be able to answer those questions, and you may not be able to answer them on your own. You may need to discuss this with your mentor, your teacher, your coach, your manager, your spouse, your other half, whatever. And you also need to look at yourself and your gut. Guts usually give you the right answer. But I think it's very important always to answer the question why satisfactorily. And there are all kinds of reasons for doing a job. I need the money. I need to prepare this role before I sing it somewhere else. Are two obvious things. But there are lots of other reasons too. And this career that you're beginning is something that should last a long time, as we were acknowledging. This is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And the only real measure of true success in this career is longevity. So think about that.
That's a Twitter moment from this.
You are.
She's right,
One other thing I'd like to say is that if you have been offered a role that is new to you, I would strongly urge you to really look at it, not just the arias, look at the ensembles, look at all of it. And even if you have the time, sing through all of it if you can, as much as you can. Recently I had a situation where a young artist wrote to me, and she was saying, I feel this is a little low for me. I'm like, well, it's a little late. You signed a contract, and now you're telling me this is too low for you. We've worked it out, but that's not, clearly she didn't look at the entire thing before she just said yes. She's like, oh, this is great, and said yes. So make sure you really do your homework before you say yes or no.
This is a splinter conversation, but I hesitate to bring it up because it seems such a small spin-off. But how do I say this? If you've been offered something and you have to say no, not through a manager, but you have to say no directly to the casting person, and you're saying no because it's not right for you, is that an implied insult to that person's casting chops?
Oh.
Like, why would you? Okay, if I'm gonna say that this isn't right for me, what I'm implying is that you were stupid in offering it to me.
No, I can see why you might feel that way, but we're just, we have our own set of ears, we have our own opinions about things, but we are not you, and we don't in your body to know how something feels. Just because something sounds like it could work doesn't mean that it will. So no, it's not offensive. We're not perfect. We've come to Caroline with some ideas, and she's like, and other times she's like, I think that'd be fantastic. So it'd be okay. I think it's okay. I think it's how you couch, how you respond.
Yeah, and I'm going to put you on the spot, Michael, but I think the most important thing for y'all to hear is that we know that we don't know everything about you. You're the only person that knows that. And I think coming out of the passage where many of you are right now, you think that we have all the answers, that we know all the things, and we just don't. So we're dependent on you to help us make those decisions.
Well, and Michael, just something that you started to say, oh, I hate microphones. Something you started to say that you had a singer who called and said, well, this is too low for me, this isn't working. What's the best way for it? These are young singers, and sometimes they take on things that once they get singing, it just isn't, the tessitura or whatever, it just isn't working for them. What's the best way for them to handle that to you, other than call you immediately? I mean, is there some way for them to handle that?
Well, I would say the sooner the better, because we cast so far out. So when it's a few months away, it makes it very difficult for us to find somebody to replace you. I think, not aside the situation. Say if you're a mezzo and you transition to soprano, that's a different topic. I mean, you could say, I was cast in this 2 years ago, and now I'm really a soprano. I mean, that's not a problem at all. It's tricky. The big thing is just is as early as you can to let us know that there's a problem or potential problem, and maybe depending upon the style it is, if it's something that can be altered in some way to make it more comfortable. If it's a new work we do a lot of new work, maybe it could be changed.
Wagner wrote an alternative version of a lot of alternative notes.
You're kind of stuck, right? I would say, because we do cast so early, you cast 2-3 years out sometimes, depending on the company, your body changes. You might have a huge weight shift, you might have had a kid, it messes with all of your hormones and this gets affected. Sometimes you just grow, you inexplicably grow in your voice. And you'll have that moment where you get like 6 months up until that contract and you go, I don't think I should do this anymore. And it's not to leave the company in the lurch or anything, but you just change. So you have to be aware of your body and what your voice is doing, and make sure that you do tell that company right away. Don't wait. If you know that it's not going to work, don't wait till the week before rehearsals start, because that's just gonna give them a headache, and
that will piss us off.
Yeah, they won't want to hire you again because you've given them all this stuff to deal with. So be honest, and it's not, if you're honest about that, yes, it'll be inconvenient just because something that was in place will have to be changed, but it's better for them that they don't have a horrible singer up on stage, so.
But one other thing along the same line, and I say this as being a vocal pedagogue as well, don't give up too quick either. I mean, if you're working on something and see, gee, this just doesn't fit right in the voice, well, maybe it's technically something that you're not doing correct. Take it to your teacher, take it to a fine coach, get a good set of ears, and a set of ears that you trust, because maybe you can sing it. Too many times, too many singers give up too quick on repertoire that could absolutely be very fine for them. So.
I'm going to use something we just had in this conversation to sort of spin off into our next general topic. And that was something Tammy said a few minutes ago about singing a role at a house that wasn't so much on the radar screen, especially in this country or in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's something that Alan said earlier today when we were talking, and I quote, the world is so connected that you can't have a bad note in Budapest anymore. Let's talk, because I want to get into the general topic of social media and interconnectedness across the whole industry. So let's take the flip side of working on something in a place that's a little less profile and talk about is there any safe place anymore where you can try something out that you think people might not notice? You want to take it?
I feel like we're doing point, counterpoint,
Yes.
So, when you're starting out, you have to try things. And in this day and age, in the recording age, people want to hear a polished performance. They want you to be the best Violetta they've ever heard. They want you to change their mind about Callis, which they never will, because Callis will always be their favorite. But, you need a place to try things out. And in our country, luckily we do have a pretty good regional system where you will get good training and good exposure, but it won't be the New York Times reviewing you. You need those chances. You need a place to try a rollout. And even the big stars who sing everywhere now, they don't sing their first debuts of a role at the big house. They try it in a littler place to get the experience, get it in their body, get used to it, so that when they do get to the quote unquote, grander world stage, that they're prepared for the scrutiny that they're going to come under. Now, regards to the scrutiny, any idiot with a blog can scrutinize you. So it's not just about the main critics anymore. It's not about the people who have studied music and actually have an educated opinion. It's about, Bob from 4 doors down who was like, I went to the opera for the first time and I didn't like it. And you're like, okay, calm down. So you need to realize that social media is going to be a part of every performance that you do. Someone's going to sneak a camera in. Someone's going to take pictures. Someone's going to say, oh, I didn't like this place, or you cracked that night. Oh my God, favorite story. Sorry, I'm going to tangent. I was in Seville doing an Aida. I had done 4 performances already. On the 5th performance, I had nothing. I had no voice. It just left. I had acute laryngitis. And it had never happened to me before, so I freaked out. And they had a doctor come it was like 3 hours before the show. And a doctor came, he did like throat massages and weird Reiki stuff, which I was a little freaked out about. And he gave me an IV of drugs to help with swelling and that kind of stuff, which is horrible and you should never do. But there was no cover, which oftentimes there will be no covers anymore. And I was in a tough spot. They weren't going to cancel the performance, and I wasn't going to mime the show. So, I sang as much as I could. I got on stage, and the other cast members, they made the announcement, oh, Miss blah, blah, blah is ill today, and usually to the audience that just means, buck up. If you have a cold, we don't care. But it was literally like, I would sing and it'd be like, it was fantastic. And I'd get on stage with my other cast members and be like, are you okay? No, keep singing. Sing louder than me so no one can hear me. And at that performance, there was a reviewer who didn't mention that I was sick and just tore me a new one. I mean, it was we don't understand why she's singing at all. She should never have been an opera singer, that kind of thing. So you have to deal with that as a human, that people are going to judge every single performance you do, even when it's not your best. And the converse problem, I'll give this to Alan, I swear. The converse problem is if you have a really, really good performance, you have to live up to that performance in the eye of the public, and that's very hard to do. Okay, go.
your really, really good performances are never as really, really good as you think they are. And your really, really bad performances are never really ever as bad as you think they are. They're just not. When they come telling you, oh, that was the greatest performance, you know it wasn't. You know, you can't fool yourself. Don't even try. This happened to me just, what is this now? This is June? Last month. Second ring cycle here. I am a horrible allergy person. I take the shots, I do the whole thing every week, the drops, the whole thing. Been like that for most of my life. And the second cycle came along and I came down with this allergies that hit Washington because we had, 21 out of 23 days in a row of rain, and the mold and mildew was absolutely horrible. And I didn't know, I struggled to get through Rheingold. We made an announcement for Valkyra, and it was tough. But you just had to do it. You had to find a way to get through. We did have a cover, but they did not want to put him on. So I had to go ahead, and you have to deal with whatever's said. And there are nights, I'm fortunate, I've been singing now 30 years this next month, and I've only had to cancel one performance. You have to learn how to be able to sing when you're sick. You have to get through these things. You have to have a technique. And by the time the week progressed, by the time I got to Siegfried, I actually got through that one pretty well. Then the next week you're still feeling it, and it weighs on your mind how much you're going to let it affect your performance. You have to find a way to get through those performances. To build your technique, know what you can handle, know what you can be able to do. You talk about going far away to do a performance. I sang my first Hans Sachs in Tokyo. I got as far away from the human beings that I possibly could, who I knew were going to write, and if they wrote, they were going to write in a language that no one else was going to be able to read. And I think that was a wise thing to do. But like what I said earlier, it used to be back in the days at the Met, for example, we really only worried about in an 8-run performance, or 8 performance run, we'd only worry about 2 of them. Opening night, because the critics would be there, and the Saturday broadcast. And I had some shows that were really nice because it was the same day, which was really great. It was kind of scary opening a performance on a Saturday broadcast, but it happened from time to time. Now, almost every one of those performances is either on Sirius XM, or it's somebody reviewing it who think they're reviewing, but they get on, if someone goes and Googles Alan Held Meistersinger, it's going to come up that Yahoo who writes as well as whoever the critic is for the New York Times. So you just have to deal with it. It's just the way it is. How much are you going to let it bother you? Is it going to destroy your career? That's ridiculous. You have to do what you've got to do. Another way to try out these roles for a first time is through concert opera, because then you don't have some strange production that's dictating what you do and how you move and how you crawl over the floor or whatever you have to do. You can stand and sing a little bit, although concert opera is now becoming semi-stage, which is becoming fully stage productions now. But you have to, that's a good way to try out roles for the first time, especially difficult roles. Put together your own thing. Get some with the people who are trying out the roles. Work on it with them. Don't be afraid to try these things.
We're going to hop onto this topic of hybrid concert stage productions in a second, but I do want to hear before we leave this from Caroline and from Michael about how much of this additional noise, the bloggers, all that kind of stuff, how much of it do you pay attention to? How much of it are you aware of?
I don't pay a whole lot, Upper Philadelphia, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to reviews. And when agents send me a packet on an artist and a whole page of reviews, I don't even look at them because it's one person's opinion. It doesn't really, mean anything to me. I'm more likely to call a company or somebody that I know, that I trust, to find out what that experience was like, how that person did. Reviews, not so much.
I think that from my perspective, a good review is useful to send to a company when they're trying to sell a season, including one of my clients. But that's the only, I'm very cynical about them. I don't believe the reviewers, even the ones in the New York Times. We know the prejudices of each of the reviewers, so we can practically write the reviews before they come out. And as for bloggers, I don't pay any attention to them at all. I have some clients who actually sit down and go through every single review of everything they've ever done with their teacher and go through it, and they do it in a positive way, and they think, well, did they have a point here? Was I, or could I, or whatever? And if you want to do that, that's fine, but there's going to come a point in your life when you're going to get bored with this. And I think either you believe all the reviews that you read or you don't believe any of them, and the sensible thing is not to believe any of them, because honestly, there have even been cases when a reviewer has reviewed something and it's later been discovered that he wasn't even present. That's a fact. So, but I think they're useful marketing tools for opera companies trying to sell tickets.
Yeah.
And also, if you're going to follow reviews, what do you do if you have one review who says one thing, one says the exactly opposite of it? Then where do you go? So.
So while we're on social media, though, this kind of thing, I do stick with you for a moment, Caroline. I want to talk about the requirements, strong or suggested, of artists to engage in social media on behalf of the company that they're being hired by.
I'm noticing more and more in contracts, particularly contracts for festivals, who obviously have a short period to sell tickets for maybe a few weeks worth of festival time, that there will be a clause saying the artist will use his or her best endeavours to use social media to publicise this event. And I, from time to time, get calls from indignant presenters saying, your client has not put on their website that they are performing with us on this date or that date. And I think that we have to go with the flow to some extent, but I still believe that the presenter of, or the promoter, or the opera company, or the orchestra has a certain responsibility to sell tickets themselves. I think artists can certainly help, and some artists are very social media literate, and some aren't, and they have to go with the flow in this way. I think there's another side to this which we have to be very careful about, which is all this tweeting and retweeting and Facebooking. You have to be so careful that you never put anything up on Facebook, even within your network, while you have drunk too much, while you are angry, or while you are upset, because you will probably regret it later, and you can't take any of this down. And you will be astonished, as I was, that opera companies get themselves onto your network somehow, or something is repeated through another friend who writes to somebody else, and somehow it gets back to the opera company. And if you write anything about an opera company that has hired you, and you indicate that you don't like the costumes, you don't like the set design, you don't like the way rehearsals went today, because nothing got accomplished, for instance, which is a perfectly innocent and natural feeling to have after a bad day of rehearsal, you are likely to get into trouble with the opera company, because they Google alert everything, and they are aware. And I've been carpeted, actually, myself, on behalf of one of my clients, who happened to quite innocently say, I'm so glad to be home from rehearsal today, and I've had a glass of wine because it was such a frustrating day, we didn't achieve anything. Now, you would think you could say that amongst your network, but be careful. It will probably get to the opera house.
And it's the Wild Wild West. I mean, understand that the people who are at the same time asking you to promote what you're doing on behalf of the company, and then are saying, oh, but what you're really doing is just promoting it because we think that social media is an authentic space. But no, your employer is generally not looking at it as an authentic space for you to be honest and to be true. They're looking at it as another PR channel. And there's a disconnect there, and it's one that you have to just live with and figure out how to skate.
Yeah, you need to navigate it.
Yeah, okay.
And some companies have different philosophies on social media and how they use it, how they ask their artists to do it. It can vary from production to production, depending upon the director. For instance, last season we did Cold Mountain, the East Coast premiere, and typically at the meet and greet we tell our artists, hey, you know, tweet out things, post things, here's the hashtag, Cold Mountain Philly, whatever it was. Leonard Folia, the director, freaked out and said, no, nothing from inside the rehearsal hall or performances can be posted on social media. If you want to do it outside, you walk out those doors, fine, but nothing from the process. So just, you have to be sensitive about what each production and the company you're with. And hopefully they're clear about that.
I want to step back a little because I cut Tammy off earlier. You were saying something about the whole review thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in regards to reviews, if you do read them, don't change your next performance to please that person. You know, you have to sing a performance for yourself and communicate your soul with somebody. And if you start picking and choosing things that people criticize you about, it's just going to make your performance suffer. That's all.
Well, that person's not going to be at the next.
Exactly.
So a few minutes ago, we referenced concert operas and all of that. I wanted to segue now to a trend that is it's a trend, it's a thing. And that is what I'm going to call hybrid productions. And I particularly want Alan and Michael to talk a little bit about the production of Salome that happened in Philadelphia that Alan was involved in. And so as opera companies, and listen, it's happening here. Leanne and I struggled with this years ago, and we could no longer afford to rent and mount a full production at the Feline Center. So we went through several years where we had a flat-out concert opera, no sets, no costumes, stand and sing, and then that got a little blocking added to it the next year, and then that got some costumes added to it the next year, and then we built a set, and then we did video projections, and now we're where we are right now with the Bohème, which is a fully rehearsed, staged, costumed, propped thing that is happening on stage with the orchestra in back of us. And what is that? I don't know. It's not a real production because the orchestra's not in the pit, and then you've got this whole thing to deal with the conductor being behind you, and you're communicating with smokes and mirrors and TV screens. So it's a thing, and it largely comes out of the fact that we've got budgetary problems, those of us who run companies, and we're trying to find ways to keep the art form out there, keep it vibrant, keep it alive, keep people working. But we're struggling with what that is. All right, that's the preamble. Who wants to take that and run with it?
Well, I think definitely budget is a big reason that at least drives some of the initial ideas for doing it. And then the progression, just doing a concert version, or then you try to do a semi-staged, and it becomes neither one. It's not really a concert, it's not a production, and it's sort of weird, and it doesn't really work. So then you start to gradually add more and more full-on production elements to it, which is what happened with the Salome that Alan was in with us in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Part of the reason I think for doing it, it also allows companies to get artists that they might not be able to engage otherwise because it's a shorter period of time. So to get somebody like Alan held for 6 weeks is more difficult than for a week, or 3 or 4 days, however long it was. So that's part of the reason for doing it. The Salome ended up being really a full production. Costume, sets, lighting, makeup, yep. And we pulled it off. It was a very short rehearsal period because we had to fit it into the existing Philadelphia Orchestra rehearsal schedule, which is very different than an opera schedule. There were times I didn't think we were going to get there, but I think we did ultimately. So did that answer part of it?
No, see what Alan has said.
I think Michael just summed that up well. Yeah, that production started out as to be concerts with the Philadelphia Orchestra. Then we said, oh, we think we're going to semi-stage this. It'll be a little movement. And it became an absolutely full production with a set built out over top of the orchestra and ladders to climb and the full costumes and makeup. And it became a huge thing. So you have to know what you're going into. Well, you think you do, but then it becomes something else. But and I remember, Kim, when we used to do full productions in the Feline Center, my 2 years here, we did a full production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and it was about 110 degrees in the shade. You did a full production of Sweeney Todd here not that many years ago, was also very hot.
Actually, that was one of the hybrid things. We did a full production of Sweeney in the Barns, but the Sweeney over there was hybrid.
Was Hoffman or something?
Oh, yeah, we Hoffman. There are many things. And you were around back in the day when we could do Prokofiev, Love for Three Oranges.
But it was hard for the Feline.
outside.
I remember when we did the Prokofiev, it was the Sendak production of it. And you tie up the Feline stage for a whole week with production. That's cutting into the revenue of Wolf Trap. They can't do other performances. I remember we did like a Thursday and a Saturday performance, and Friday Jay Leno came in to do a comedy show, and he's out there with production with scenery of Maurice Sendak up around at the same time. It just doesn't work. And so you're getting all these hybrid and other type of things that fit into the schedule. I remember this year, for example, At the Kennedy Center, we were doing the ring cycle. So the Opera House at the Kennedy Center had to basically shut down for 2 months while we rehearsed. Well, that's not economical for anybody. Fortunately, then it's all sold out, so they made it back later on. But it's a business, it's a revenue thing for these theaters, and so a lot of consideration has to go in.
Is my instinct right, Caroline, that we're seeing more of these kinds of gigs? Do you proportionally see more concert, more? Yeah, so I mean, from where I sit, it seems like it's happening, but another trend, and jumping on this because Michael mentioned Cold Mountain, and we were talking about commissions, new pieces, recent, 21st and 20th century works, and versus old, I guess we'll call them war horses. And I'll preface this by saying, when I was at Opera America conference a few weeks ago, a lot of the regional companies were bemoaning the fact that the formula that regional companies in this country have used for, 50 years, forever, to balance their budgets over the course of a season is to pick one of the ABCs, Aida, Bohème, Carmen, and the kinds of pieces that will sell out. Sell it to the wall, do as many performances as you can, and then use the subsidy that you get from that production to help pay for sort of like the middle, moderate stream cozies and things like that people kind of know but really don't, and then to really float the one cool new piece that they want to do, which is going to bleed financial death and no one's going to come to, and they're going to get credit for doing it, and it's going to be very exciting artistically, but nobody's going to care. But Michael was telling me how he and David sort of like turned that on its ear with this most recent season.
We're developing a lot of new work at Opera Philadelphia. Right now we have, I think there are 8 projects in development at various stages that will be premiered down the line. They're a lot of work, but it is the trend now. Whether or not that will stand the test of time, I feel like back maybe in the 70s, and there was a big push of new opera. And then it seemed to kind of die down a little bit, and the standards came back up, and now we're back in a period that people are really excited about new work. We were shocked to find out after Cold Mountain closed, and we got all the figures back from the box office. Cold Mountain was our number 4 top-selling show since the year 2000. Of new work. Compare that with the production we did right after that, which was Elixir of Love, and we couldn't even sell $10 tickets for it. So it's kind of the way, I think it's a trend right now, I think it's the hot thing, but I hope that it's going to last because some of the things that are being written are really, really fantastic. And maybe we can talk about this more in the next session, but one of the things I was thinking about is that it's tricky from a casting perspective because, I'm casting things that haven't been written yet in many cases. So it's hard. You have to take a chance sometimes when you're offered something. Mr. Liverman took a chance and accepted an engagement with us for Charlie Parker's Yardbird, and I think he had a big success. I think it was a good experience for him.
Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah.
But he didn't have any music. He just said yes. He just took a leap of faith that we engaged a composer and a librettist that were going to do their job and do it well, and that we were going to shepherd the process along appropriately. We workshopped them, of course, but sometimes you have to, take that chance.
Michael, how much does a young singer, let's say they do something like Will did, jump into a new production, new opera, how much input can the singer have and say, gee, that's just not vocally possible to do? I mean, is there any chance of that?
I think it depends a bit upon the creative team, the composer you're working with. We firmly believe, and we try to schedule our workshops in a manner that it's very open, it's very collaborative. And again, but some composers are very open to making changes, and others are not. I think you just have to sort of feel that out when you're in the process. But that's the time to do it, definitely.
Do you cast your workshop singers with the final singers in mind?
We try to have the actual cast, as much of the actual cast as we can, be at every workshop, because I think it's crucial to the development of the piece. So it makes it more difficult sometimes from a scheduling perspective, but workshops are often only, maybe a week or sometimes less, so we can try to fit them in. That's the ideal. It doesn't always work. So we will engage younger singers. In Philadelphia, we're lucky to have Curtis and AVA right there, so I can use resources there. And sometimes, though, those people end up doing the roles. It happened, we just did a workshop for a piece that we're going to premiere in 2017 called Elizabeth Creed by Kevin Putz and Mark Campbell. Kevin wrote Silent Night, and we cast the lead roles, but there were probably like 4 or 5 supporting roles. And I had people that I thought were right for it. Some were young artists, some were not. One is a woman that I went to school with, actually, and I've been hoping to find a project for her. So I engaged them to sing the workshop, just in lieu of them bringing them in for an audition, to have the creative team have a week to work with them, and not just 10 minutes. And 4 out of the 5 are now singing the roles. So.
I started this out by talking about the new works and the business model from the perspective of the company, but I think that it's worth drawing the connection to help the singers understand. We hope that things like Cold Mountain, things that are successfully premiered, will enter the canon and will begin to get second, third, fourth, that it has had, but begin to get more productions. But you got to realize that if your reality is not that you're going to invest in learning Susanna and be able to take Susanna to the bank at least once a year for the next 20 years, if increasingly your jobs are coming from pieces that are not being repeated as regularly, you have to become as facile as you can to learn things quickly, to retain them quickly, and to be self-sufficient, because you'll lose a lot of your own resources if you're not. Clarissa?
Along those lines, do you feel like this new music premiere trend is also happening in Europe? And how do you think singers should adjust their packages in order to facilitate more jobs in those areas?
So do we feel that the trend of increasing the amount of new work is also happening in Europe, and what are the implications for singers in adjusting their audition packages and the way they present themselves?
I think it is happening in Europe. We're co-commissioning a piece with La Monnaie, and won't be premiered until about 2021, but I think it's not just America. I think everybody is experiencing the same issues with subscriptions and ticket sales. How people want to consume opera is different. Why a lot of companies either have or are, like we are, shifting to a festival format, because we think that is how people, they want to, it's the same philosophy of binge watching a show on Netflix or something. People want to come in and see a bunch of things and then move on to the next thing. And we've done a lot of research, and we have a very high single ticket sale base, but only 30% of them come back. But it's not because they didn't like it, it's because they've gone on to the next thing. And what was the other part of your question? How singers should pack. I don't know that you really completely adjust your packet. You need to sing what you sing well, first and foremost. I think if you have something contemporary that you sing well, then offer it. I mean, I think it's important for us to also offer something in English, just because most of the things we're commissioning are in English. It's great to hear how you sound singing in English. But I don't know that I would worry too much about adjusting. Sing what you sing and sing well. End of the day, that's what's important.
And if you are doing something that's very new, I would make sure it's something that's had a performance or two, that it's not some piece that like your cousin wrote and said, gee, I thought this would be really good for me to try out or something like that. Have it be something like, I don't know, a JKD piece or something that is getting some performances or something like that's been in Philadelphia or something. Just not something that's someone sitting in Europe saying, what in the world is this piece? I mean, not have a clue what it is.
Trend. Opera in HD on the internet streaming video. Discuss.
Yeah. Do I need to say more? Okay. This is my personal opinion, and there are many opinions about this in our business. I don't believe that our medium is another medium. Let me specify that. film industry is made for close-up emotional moments that are very intimate, that go on a epic scale like Ben-Hur or something like that. We have epic moments in opera, but when you have a camera that's 5 feet away from our face, we look ridiculous. You know, it's not, you're not gonna have the silent screen movie star quality that you hope for unless you're lip syncing. Because in those movies, musicals, all that stuff, everybody was lip syncing or singing down an octave with their playback. When you put a camera on us now, it just, well, first of all, you can see everyone's tongue technique, which is fantastic and good if you're trying to be a pedagogue. But I would say you miss the theater aspect of what our job is. And unless it's shot in a way, where in the 80s, I would say when they'd shoot something for a DVD, things were pretty good. You would shoot it as an opera.
Number 6, how do you know?
I watch stuff on TV. They have reruns. But like nowadays with the HD, you have to employ, you know, different makeup, different hair and wig. It's a whole nother end of an industry to bring into our industry. Things that I enjoy about it, you get a bigger outreach. I loved going to the movies and eating popcorn and sharing my moments with 12 other people in the theater to watch an opera. You know, it was actually really cool. But there's nothing that beats going to live theater. And I would say this is the same for musical theater, for street theater. I don't think it's just us. But to think that changing our medium to a film-based medium is going to save our quote-unquote dying art that's been dying for like 500 years, it's not going to work. And it could have an adverse effect. I enjoy the fact that more people can get to it. The Met Player Online is fabulous. And if you're trying to research things as a student, it's fantastic because you see a tradition, which is great, which you wouldn't be able to in your little town unless you're in a very good opera town. As far as the repercussions for yourself as a singer, it puts an entirely new pressure on you to look like a model. And if God invented models that were also singers, we'd all be models. That's just not how the world works. Naomi Campbell would have been a fabulous opera singer, you know, she would have been gorgeous, but that she's not an opera singer. I would say that people who are beautiful, who can sing, awesome, go for it, that is fantastic. But to expect somebody who has an amazing talent to live up to a standard of beauty, you're just gonna shoot yourself in the foot and get rid of a generation of singers who would otherwise be singing and doing fabulous work just because they don't look like what you think they look like. I mean, Pavarotti was singing like Nemorino into his like 40s, you know, it's not, and that's not that character's age. But as a theatrical genre, we're supposed to suspend belief and make a fantasy. If we try to make our genre real, and it doesn't work. Our stories are dumb, first of all. Every single opera, if you look at the plot, you go, what? No. You know, it's just not a thought out time because it's emotions elongated over time. So, I'm talking too long. Okay,
Sorry.
that's what I think.
No one's lunging. Oh, there, Michael's reaching. No, so no one's lunging for the microphone, but I'm going to encourage everybody else to weigh in because I want to know from Michael and from Caroline how, if they see this trend at all affecting casting. But before I get to that, I want to do counterpoint with Tammy and say, y'all know because we have recorded that was last summer. We've recorded Lucretia and we're about to record Opera Seria. So we are starting to play in this field online, of course, not in the theaters. Because I believe, and I agree, I don't disagree with anything you said, and I think, yes, it's not going to save our art form, but I think increasingly as we move into the 21st century, people are not taking risks with their resources, their time, their money on art forms with which they have no familiarity. And how are they getting the familiarity? It's out there on the internet. There has to be some sort of taste-making thing going on with people. I'm supposed to be asking the questions. I'm not supposed to be telling what you think. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Michael, go.
I think I agree with everything you said. I think the discussion of making up a real pretty people, that's a completely separate thing, in my opinion, in a way. I think the whole HD and broadcasting and recording, I think it's just the reality. So you need to figure out a way to be comfortable with it, because that's what's happening. I think it's the way, again, it's the way people want to consume the art form. They may not want to go to the theater, even though that's the ideal way to go to see something. There's nothing like a live performance. But they might want to sit in their, in their pajamas in their living room with their iPad and watch it that way. And we as opera companies, in order to, it does, while it may not directly affect ticket sales, it does affect.
Does it help a revenue stream?
Well, it depends. Opera Philadelphia doesn't do something that we charge for. We do a broadcast. We record one performance and then we broadcast it down to Independence Mall in Philadelphia. And last year we had about 6,000 people there for Traviata. And we thoroughly expect that probably 75-80% of those people will never step foot in the Opera House. And that's okay. That's not what it's about. It's about creating a civic pride in your local opera company and feeling that for the city to feel that they are a part of something that's bigger and that they can take some pride in. It does not, for us, I can't speak for anybody else, it does not affect how we cast. I fight with directors often, and sometimes in these new works especially, I will have conversations with them about, types and, and physical types, that it plays a role into it, but it does not change how we do it. Correct.
Gotcha.
Caroline, are you seeing casting and casting offers change due to this?
I agree with what has been said so far, but I also have to say that indeed there are some companies, both in North America and in Europe, where casting is dictated to some degree by the demands of HD transmissions, and so there are choices, perhaps, in physical types that may or may not be engaged if indeed the project is to be an HD transmission, which is pretty awful, but it is a fact. I think that there are two extremely separate products now, operatically speaking. One is the live performance, and the other is the HD transmission that goes into cinemas. Some opera companies are very successful in their HD transmissions into cinemas, some aren't. The Met's very successful. Glyndebourne is getting its act together. Covent Garden just transmitted into Trafalgar Square on June the 9th a performance of Nabucco, and it was free to everybody who showed up. There has been an enormous amount of discussion about how to compensate people for this, because this whole business is not actually very new. Years ago, the very distinguished conductor Herbert von Karajan at Salzburg would direct for cameras his productions of all sorts of operas, including Otello and Carmen, etc., etc. And all these things exist in the Unitel catalogue today, so it's not necessarily a new thing. But what has happened more recently is that the cost of going to the opera in New York or in any major city is prohibitive if you're more than one person, probably, and even if you're just one person. And it's much cheaper to go to the mall and see something that is an experience. It's an entirely different experience, but it is an experience, and you see the changing of scenery, you see breathless singers being interviewed after they finished their big aria and all of this. And for a lot of people, this is something that they enjoy. I think it's questionable whether it's a good move forward or not, because it certainly cannibalised the box office at the Met, for example. On the other hand, the outreach aspect of it is important, and it has brought an awful lot of people to understand a little bit more about opera. They would probably not come to the Met, for example, but they might well go to their local cinema and enjoy at least part of the performance, because you can get up and leave whenever you want. When you're in the cinema, not so easy if you're in the middle of a row in an opera house. But it's a very large topic, and we're just scratching the surface of it. There are all sorts of aspects to be considered, including the contractual ones, what payment is appropriate, how the rights are used, etc., etc. So this is a subject that we had in New York, I confess, 4 or 5 years worth of monthly meetings trying to figure out. So it's a subject that's really very detailed. It's something that may be a better subject for our next session.
You just said what I wanted to say. Some of this might be better in the next session as well. I have a lot of strong feelings about this. I am not a fan of the HD broadcast. I don't think it's opera. It's opera prime. It's a subcategory of opera. It's not opera as I knew it for the first 2/3 of my career. And when this all started coming around 10 years ago, I was not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it when I'm rehearsing it and I'm being told that, no, you can't do this because it's not basically going to fit in the screen. I'm sorry, it's just not opera. I'm also not a fan of what it's done to what I think is happening, part of the box office problem we have in some places. I don't think it's really attracting a new audience. I think it's hurting some of the smaller opera companies out there. I've had people from some of these companies say, we can't sell our tickets because people say, well, gee, we can just go to the HD broadcasts and we can see everything so up close, and they're having problems selling some of their seats. I have a lot of feelings about this. Yeah, we'll wait.
We're referencing the next session, and what we're going to do is going to have a little late dinner upstairs for just the artists and the panel, and turn off the video camera, and we'll dig into these things. Yeah, that's where everything goes down. So we talk about casting and casting to body type and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk a little bit more about the vagaries from, especially I guess Michael's end, but you know what goes into making these choices. Many of you were here several weeks ago when Corey Lipiella was here, and she did her little casting exercise, helped open your eyes hopefully to some of the things that go on. We talk about you saying no. Well, you get rejected by some of the people at this table pretty regularly. How advice for the artists and just this general topic of handling all this rejection.
When I started at Opera Philadelphia, I've been there 6 years, and as Kim mentioned, I'm a performed singer. It was really eye-opening, the whole casting process, and also the audition process. Being on the other side of the table is really interesting. So much goes into it that you don't think about, or I didn't think about, more than just whether or not you are right for a specific role, whether you can sing it, as well as the person that actually got cast. It could be that person that got cast has a history with the company. It could, and is somebody that they're working, they have a promotion they have been planning for them. It could have to do with if it's a new production with a concept about, and the director has a certain idea for the character. We did a Romeo and Juliet many years ago that was updated, and the concept was it was a battle between two high fashion design houses. And so it was non-traditional casting, so the Gertrude was not your sort of typical old woman. She was young, and she had to run around in like sweats and jump rope and do stuff. So it could be that. It could be a reason why you weren't cast. It could be how you might be great for the role, but in context of everybody else that's in the production, how you fit in with that, with everybody. We think about a lot of those things. We think about if we know the person and we know that they're great colleagues, we love working with them, we will go with that person. If all things are basically equal between two people, we'll go with the person that we know isn't crazy. Okay, I said it.
I've had instances where people have been not cast because the tenor is too short and the soprano is too tall, or the other way around. You know, I'm afraid it happens, and because depending on the design and the concept of the director, it could add a new comic twist to an otherwise tragic story.
I've done a lot of like down kissing.
So that's one thing that and I do think, and we were speaking about this before meeting you this afternoon, that one of the things that I sympathise with you more than anything else is right now at this stage in your careers, you are spending a lot of time auditioning, and every time you get up there and audition, you are risking rejection, and it's something you have to deal with, and you have to, as we're saying in the context of these questions now and our comments, it's quite often, I hate to tell you lot, it's quite often not about you personally. It really isn't. There are so many considerations in place, and this is something that it's hard for you to understand, because you may well know you did a great audition and you can't quite put your finger on why you didn't get the job and why whoever it was did get the job. And there are all kinds of considerations that don't even come across the email trail for you. But Michael will know more about that.
Well, sometimes it's as simple as where you live, where you're located. If I can hire somebody that lives in Philadelphia or within, according to our AGMA agreement, within 55 miles of Philadelphia, then I don't have to provide transportation or housing. And sometimes it boils down to that.
I'm going to tread gently into the next topic, which is connected to this, which is okay, so it boils down to all these things, most of which are not within your control. And in a lot of competitive environments, and this is one of those, because each one of you within your own demographic has managed to claw your way to where you are. That said, you're going to, Alan will attest this, you're going to look around 10, 20, 30 years from now and see very few of your colleagues who are still working. I don't say this to scare you. I know that a lot of places in any kind of competitive environment, whether it be law school, medicine, finance, one of the character building exercises, okay, now look to your right, now look to your left, and there's only one other person in the room that you see that you're ever going to see work again. I don't want to scare you that way, but what I want to do is just put that out there and say, okay, panel, if that's a reality, what does it mean for how they should live their lives now? What are the implications for what they should be doing right now to be able to roll with whatever comes your way?
It's a very hard thing when you're first starting out to give up control of your fate. You want to be very proactive. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to put your best foot forward and to have your career start. And the unfortunate reality is that you're not in charge of it. The only thing that you're in charge of is your preparation, how you communicate, not just as a business person, but as a human, how you communicate to others. And what your goals are. And honestly, some of you won't meet your goals. It's just the luck of how things play out. In my Young Artist program, I was with amazing singers. Some of them are having careers, some of them are not. And I couldn't really tell you, aside from some personalities, it's more just the chances that they were offered and what they took, and how they presented themselves when those opportunities came. If you get an opportunity and you waste it by being a diva and are unprofessional, your career is done. It's just done. If you get an opportunity and show a company that you work hard, that you are goal-oriented, that you respect and treat everybody with a same kind of fairness, your career It might not be like, oh, famous. That's kind of not what our career does anyway. The famous ones it's a very narrow margin. So to just keep working and keep singing, it's up to you as a person to be a solid person and just kind of allow the fact that other people are in control, and you kind of just got to ride with it. Don't let, I said this in my other seminar when I was here, don't let singing be your life. If you start out and it's only singing all the time, you're gonna get disappointed. Because there'll be, even if you're working, there'll be 3 months where you don't have jobs. And you'll feel dejected and like you're not doing anything or your career's not going the way you want. You kind of have to just go, hey, I have 3 months off. I could go on vacation. I could go work for this farm to table thing. I don't know. I'm just making history. Sorry. Oh, I told myself not to swear. I'm so bad about it. I've been doing really good though. So yeah, you kind of have to make sure that your life works with your singing career and doesn't become your singing career.
Singing is what you do, it's not who you are. What was the original question we were talking about?
Sorry.
Just want to make sure.
My sobering statement that it's tough to build a career and not very many people actually make it to doing it full time. What does it mean if you're sitting here at this age? What does it mean?
We've talked about a lot of things here today, social media, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Most important thing is how are you absolutely or actually developing your voices? It still comes down to that. And so many times we're thinking about so much how to present ourselves, how to do this, and we forget about the most important thing. We don't spend the time actually developing and establishing a technique that is good for the long haul. As Kim mentioned, 30 years ago, I think of my first group of apprentices and my first apprenticeship was not at Wolf Trap, but I look at that group and there's maybe one that's doing a fest contract in Europe right now. Everybody else is pretty much done. It's how you build these things. What have you established as a foundation? How have you presented yourself early on? Did you make enemies? People don't forget. People from one company talk to somebody in another company. That reputation, that image goes forward. It's very important, and I advise singers all the time. The old saying, keep your nose clean, is very important. Now, that's not to say you cut off your character, cut off who you are. Not that at all, because you don't want to do that. But you have to absolutely take care of the business of singing, and the primary point of all that is to have a voice that is developed correctly, that will last and stay with you. You don't want a voice that can all of a sudden make a splash and then can't sing something else. It's very important to take care of that part of it.
I'll throw this to Michael for kind of obvious reasons, but there are a lot of related jobs in this industry that singers can handle extraordinarily well, and I'm always happy to see someone who ends up in one of those positions who knows what it's like to be on stage.
Yeah, I can really only speak about my experience, which was sometime in my mid-30s, around 33, 34, something changed for me. My priorities in life changed, what I wanted out of life. And as much as I loved singing and loved music, I realized it wasn't going to give me the quality of life that I wanted. And I don't love traveling. I like being at home, so that's a problem. I was fortunate enough, well, for a while actually, I worked at Starbucks. And,
Yeah.
and then I actually got a job as the marketing PR person at ADA for a bit, and then I worked for a couple of orchestras before finally ending up at Opera Philadelphia. But I did go through a period of, okay, what does this mean? If I am not Michael the singer, then who am I? And am I a failure because I am not that person? And because it's hard when then you see your friends who are out singing, they're like, oh, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm working at Starbucks. And they're spouting their resume off to you, and it's hard. But I realized that it's a choice that I made. And I know for me, I made the right choice. And there are plenty of things that you can do. You can be an artistic administrator, you can be an agent, you can work at other positions at an opera company. Development, singers are great
Singers
at
are
development.
awesome at development.
And Grant Laney was telling me that you guys do a thing where you have like a mock cocktail party where you have to talk with people.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet this
Oh.
year. Yeah.
Well, you might have to do it now.
It's coming. Leanne says it's coming. She's
Oh,
in charge
shoot,
of
did
it.
I say something
That's
out
like
of
half
turn?
your job is networking with the people who give money to
Completely.
companies. Yeah.
Completely.
And we love them because there are some of them in this room. We love those people who give money to us. But just know that representing is an important skill, and it really helps to have singers who love what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
I said that I was going to let you ask questions a while ago, and then we just ran on. We have a few minutes left. Is there anything that I've cut off at the knees that the singers want to know? Like I said, we're going to break for dinner, and we'll have a chance to ask some more questions after that. Anybody in the room have any questions? Yeah, Susan.
I have a question. So somebody told me once when I was complaining about not having enough work that nobody has enough work. Is that something that you all either feel or get a sense of from your colleagues, that there's this idea out there that there's just never enough work?
Could I answer that, being the one who receives these calls sometimes from artists?
It didn't take much encouragement, did it?
It is a nervous tick amongst all singers that if you aren't working all the time, you're failing, and you are wrong. And I for a long time, represented an extremely internationally famous artist whose first question when I would meet her at the airport would be, "What is so-and-so doing?" It was a younger singer in her repertoire. This woman had everything in the world at her feet. But it's never enough for you, and that's right. It shouldn't ever be enough. You should never get complacent. On the other hand, you need to get real and understand that there is a value in the asset of time. You're finding now, I understand that you aren't getting enough work. So what do you do with this time? How are your foreign languages? What could you do in this time, which when you get further into your career, this time, this free time is going to be so precious to you, and you're going to complain to your manager. I mean, I spent, I think it was 15 days in my bed this year.
That's amazing.
And it's just not fair, and I don't know what to do about it. So take this time now and use it wisely. If you have that time, it's an asset, it really is. Learn a language, do an immersion course, go to Italy, do something, enter some more competitions, pile up that prize money and use it for invest in yourself by using this time. It's very important. Can't emphasize it enough, as you can tell.
And learn your roles during this time. How many singers wait, okay, the opera rehearsal period is in November. How many wait until September to make sure they really have the whole thing learned? I mean, this is what we do as singers. We wait and then we're just, are we going to get it learned in time? Take the time. Take the time that you have to learn your roles so you're solid and you're relaxed when you go into a program. Caroline's absolutely right. You need to take this time to grow as a person. I mean, I used to say, okay, I want to work this many months of a year, I needed it, and I'd panic if I didn't. It wasn't until later on that I realized I needed that time, and I'm still singing 30 years later because I had the time off. It's important to take time off. It's a luxury. I know a lot of you are coming from situations where your parents may say, are you ever going to work? Are you ever going to do something? You know? Yeah, I'd been in the business for 20 years, and an uncle said to my mom, well, I never really thought that opera singing thing was going to work out, you know? Why do we always talk to people with a southern accent when we do that? But it's true, it's true. But take the time, enjoy the time, don't panic. It'll come.
All right, that's a perfect place to end. Don't panic. Keep calm. We're going to take a little break, and the singers are going to, and the pianists are going to rejoin us upstairs. Thank you all for your wonderful amount of attention. We could feel it up here, and thank you so much to our panelists.